It's timeline for the Reformation. We're going to go 1400 to 1600, but there's a larger gap for the 1500s because that's essentially where most of everything happens. All right. I'll try to color coordinate right as neatly as I can, but here is everything that you need to know. Just start with the Reformation. Okay. What moment do we start with? No. We start. 95 Theses would have failed without the printing press. All right. Now, what they need to know from the printing press is this idea, is this spread of new ideas. We've talked a lot with literacy and the idea of speaking in the vernacular, but what they want to know for this is the spread of new ideas and their impact. What comes next is 1517. One of the all-important dates that you need to know. And that's Martin Luther's 95 Theses, a list of 95 complaints about the Roman Catholic Church that really spurs the entire Protestant Reformation. And what happens immediately after the 1517 95 Theses? The Catholic Church's reaction to Martin Luther is not good. They don't agree with some of his points. They don't like anything. So they hold the diet of worms, of verms. Right, where they force him to recant. They eventually excommunicate him. He spends a long time in jail. We know that story. One thing I did forget, I should have mentioned earlier, is in the 1400s, what's the most Catholic country in the world?
Spain.
It's really Italy because that's the home of the Roman Catholic Church. But you were right. I was going for Spain. And what does Spain do to non-Catholics? Spanish Inquisition. Convert or die. The Spanish Inquisition. They target Muslims and Jews specifically, but anybody goes after it. So what we've ended up with now is this era of the Protestant Reformation. We'll put it until the mid-1500s. It goes, you can argue it goes later. But this is the Protestant Reformation. If we have to pick the key concept people from the Protestant Reformation, we would pick two people. Number one we know is Luther, I should say. Who's the other one?
Calvin.
As the biggest impact is John Calvin. Okay, he's a little bit more radical. He comes a little bit later than Martin Luther, and certainly has his own impact. Besides these two, the College Board actually lists one other group of Protestant reformers. They are the most radical of all of them.
Oh, the ones, the Anabaptists.
Anabaptists. The Anabaptists, okay? But that's the Protestant Reformation. That's the early part. That's the real gist of it. But what it all comes from, like we talked about in our periodization, is there are these new beliefs and new practices, okay? And key among the new beliefs and the new practices is what? Was the biggest problem that Martin Luther had? It wasn't indulgences, it was one level up. Think the feudal system, right? It was anti-clericalism. If you remember what anti-clericalism is, it means anti-clergy. Okay? He's against the medieval role of the Roman Catholic Church. All right? Now, in that, we listed four things that he doesn't like that the clergy is doing. Number one is indulgences. The buying and selling of little tickets that get you out of sins and let you go to heaven. The next biggest one, you remember? Is pluralism, holding multiple offices so that you can earn multiple salaries and earn more money. That goes along with what other thing? Absenteeism. It's a fun word to spell. Good luck. The other two are a little weird. They're more like vocab words that we should know. There's something called simony, which is the selling of church offices. So if I know that Evan is the holiest person, the most religious, and deserves this bishop position, but Cliffle pays me more, then I'm going to give it to Cliffle, right? The last one is nepotism. To borrow it. Is nepotism. Is buying and selling of church, nepotism is giving it to a family member. So I wouldn't give it to either of them. I would give it to my nephew, Jordan. Sorry, Nolan, you're not getting a job. you're a woman. They don't go like that. God bless you in here. All right. Okay. Now, the changes that go along with this. Okay, the big changes that come. The primary one, think the feudal system, is the role of the priest. Okay? So instead of having an all-powerful priest in a lot of these Protestant religions, think Martin Luther. What does he say? He doesn't have an ordained priest that controls heaven and controls the Eucharist, and we need to have Mass. What he has instead, do you remember the term he used? He has something called the priesthood of all believers. Okay? Something called the priesthood of all believers, meaning everybody has the role and the ability to be a part of it. Okay? You can also write in women, their role is changing here. But the two biggest points that Martin Luther and the Reformers focus on, I know it's hard to see here at the bottom, but the two biggest points are, number one, think what started it all, indulgences. So he looks at what?
Money.
How you get into heaven. And what do we call that? Salvation is one of the two key points of the Protestant Reformation. Okay? Now, in salvation, what do we write next to it? Faith alone, grace alone, Scripture. And then finally, at the very bottom, one of the key things we struggle with on all sides is, where is the ultimate authority? Where do you learn the rules of religion, the rules of heaven, and the rules of God? According to Protestant Reformers, you learn it from Scripture. Okay? You learn it from Scripture, from the Bible. Now, for the Roman Catholics, even in the Counter-Reformation, they are going to argue that you learn it from both Scripture and tradition. That what we've done throughout history should still last here. Okay. Now, next step is the Catholic Counter-Reformation. The Catholic Counter-Reformation is going to come along not too long after the Protestant Reformation begins. It goes into the late 1500s. It's called the Catholic Reformation. Sometimes you hear it referred to as the Counter-Reformation, both of which are right. Good work. Now, the big moment in the Catholic Reformation, the Counter-Reformation, is in the 1540s and 1560s. Pope Paul III sets up the Council of Trent, where they revamp a lot of the church. The number one thing they focus on is anti-clericalism. They cut out a lot of indulgences, they cut out pluralism and all this other junk. So they do clean up the church. But the biggest key concept to come of this is the Council of Trent sets up a group of a new series of orders, of religious orders. The most famous of which is what?
Jesuits.
Founded by? St. Ignatius Loyola's Jesuits. Okay? What's Jesuit stand for, by the way? You know? Sometimes they use this. It's Society of Jesus, okay, with the Jesuits. All right. The other big one we talked about is who or what?
The Ursulines.
Ursuline nuns. Right. Ursuline nuns. Now, what is the goal? Both of these groups have two main goals. Spread religion, or evangelicize, right, to find new converts. They lost a lot of Protestant people to the Protestant Reformation. They want to get some new ones back. What's the second goal of these? And you see this more today.
Education.
Education. Very good. Let's teach. Now, the one thing I do want to mention, this is a key concept. You might see her name on the test. Is Saint Teresa pops up now and again. Okay? You don't need to know much about her. Just know that she fits in right here. So whatever they ask about her will probably work for the Ursuline Order of Nuns.
Didn't she make the Ursuline Order of Nuns?
No, that was Angela Merici, but she's closely tied with some other works. Okay? So we got new works. Now let's do... The last big section we have is state control. Okay? Last big section we have is state control. Now let me ask you this. Oh, first off, this whole era, I don't know a good place to put it, but overall, you could write this right here at the top if you want. I'm going to write it over this side. is we have now this rising situation of, we'll call it loose morals. Loose moral. Okay, so people are either getting free or they're doing all new stuff that really kind of used to be sins, but it still is. People have a problem with this. The church has a problem, but the church is losing power. By the way, what's the number one complaint with society? What's the number one thing society is messing up? It's not women. Think,
Education.
what is the church really, really against?
Divorce.
Sex, okay? Premarital sex, prostitution, the whole 9 yards. So there are a lot of new rules. Now listen, the church does not have the power to make rules like this anymore. So who does it?
Government.
Governments. Government control. They are increasing their power and influence, right? The best example of a mix between religion and government, where religion truly makes the laws and controls society, is Calvin's Geneva. Genoa is in Italy. Geneva is in Switzerland. Calvin's Geneva, it's a true theocracy, right? Dancing is illegal. The women are taught to read, but they're only allowed to read the Bible, so some step forward, some steps, well, even. And finally, I do want to mention, with government control here, if some people are doing some stuff against society that you don't really like them, most notably the group we go after, if the church is in charge, what group do we really go after?
The minorities.
Muslims.
We will go after Muslims and Jews, but not for the morality in Europe. Women, okay? If you want to brand a woman as evil, you claim she is witch hunts. Witch hunts goes throughout the 1500s into the 1600s. Takes a little while to spread to America, but when it does, it catches like wildfire. That's why, did you guys read The Crucible yet?
Yeah.
That's set in the 1600s because it comes after. It takes a while to spread over to us. All right. Now, as for specific countries, let me ask you, let's split it up like this. State control. First country is the Holy Roman Empire. Now, the Holy Roman Empire, are they doing better or worse during this time period?
Worse.
They are going down. What's the best sign that the Holy Roman Empire, who is ruled by who?
Habsburgs.
The Habsburgs. Charles V here, good, but the Habsburg family. What's the best sign that they're going down?
They no
Habsburgs
longer
are
let
losing.
everybody be run one religion.
It has to do with religion, but we can be even more specific.
30 years war.
15, not 30 years war yet. 1555, Peace of Augsburg. After the 95 Theses and the Protestant Reformation spreads, especially in Germany, right? Local nationalism. There's so many conflict and riots and small little battles that Charles V realizes the only way he can keep some control is if he allows Protestantism to be legal. So he lets local princes choose whether or not somebody is going to be Protestant or whether or not they're going to be Catholic, which is a pretty big moment. Okay? 30 Years' War comes in 1618 to 1648. We'll talk about it at the end. Next country is England. How's England doing?
Great.
Yeah, better. Right? They're doing better. Okay? You can think of it early, mid-1500s, all the way for a while. We have the Tudor dynasty. We know most famously Henry VIII. He breaks off from the Roman Catholic Church. He creates the Anglican Church, names himself a governor, right? That increases his power. But the big point for England at this time period is Elizabeth.
What was it to do?
It's their last names. Henry VIII and Elizabeth.
What general?
1540s-ish. The big one is this. Elizabeth, you should know-ish, 1558 to 1603. Late 1500s, right at the start of the 1600s is when she croaks. Right. But what's her big moment too in time?
Oh, when she defeats the Spanish.
1588, she defeats the Spanish Armada. Okay, that's England. One last one we need to talk about is France. And how or what is France doing? France is all over the place. Okay, And that's because of the conflicts. Our last section. The French Wars of Religion pitted Catholics against Protestants. What were the name of the French Protestants? The Huguenots. And there were a couple important people in this era. There's Catherine de' Medici, but who's the man who's most famous? Do you remember? The French king. Henry IV. During his wedding, what happens? Yeah, do you remember St. Bartholomew's, St. Bart's massacre? Because of this, he realizes the tensions, he realizes this can't continue, France will fail, he will fail. So, in 1598, he proclaims the, what? Edict. How you guys doing? Not. Which stays in place until when? Until who, I guess I should say.
The Sun King.
Louis XIV gets rid of the Edict of Nantes because he wants to rule only one religion. That increases his power in absolutism. We'll talk about that. The very last thing that I want to mention in conflicts is the Netherlands. The Netherlands is ruled by Spain at the time, but I want you to picture Netherlands as not its own little country. Netherlands and Belgium are combined. They are one country, okay? And let me ask you this. By the time we get to the middle, late 1500s, is the Netherlands Protestant or Catholic? Both. All right? There's a northern region, which will become the Netherlands, and a southern region, which will become Belgium. Which one is Protestant?
Northern.
Why the northern region? They're farther away, but a better reason.
Closer to Germany.
They're closer to Germany, and you remember Scandinavia and Denmark, they are very Protestant countries. So, they fight a war for a while, we kick them out, and the Netherlands splits. That's it, guys. Thanks for paying attention. I'll see you on Wednesday.